So that brings us to today in postmodern treatment. And I say postmodern because several things are happening. As we all know, we're still currently in a global crisis and pandemic in which a lot of realizations, catastrophes, insight. It's a very balance of devastation and also for a lot of people, an alternate reality, a new normal that's kind of, letting people see that there's other ways to exist as a human being, that can be better work-life balance, that can be, working from home and focusing on our mental health and our family and things that matter. I know that isn't the case for everyone, but I did just want to say how this is kind of developing a new world and how mental health treatment is doing the best that they can to accommodate that space for everyone in whatever phase of recovering that they in with this crisis and everything else that may be happening for them as a result. So this graph is pretty cool. It just kind of is a visual representation of who's seen a therapist, whether virtually or in person, at any point during the coronavirus pandemic. So this could mark, from today all the way back to now, almost 2 years. And what I've seen as a therapist is that there's been a dramatic increase in clients and just building my caseload, which is great for me, but also great for humanity. I'm really glad to see that whether, working from home now or, other conditions that allow them to focus more on their mental health is being now allowed and, putting as a priority as opposed to something secondary. And also that, it's to the point where we can't run from the mental health anymore, we can't hide from it. So that symptoms are maybe getting so severe that we're finally like, okay, let me see someone for this. Okay, so bye, Danny, thanks for checking in.
No problem.
Yes, so for this, I just really wanted to let people see, where the generations are going with this. Of course, Generation Z is in the lead of getting treatment, but right behind is millennials. Gen X isn't too far behind with 28% that they seek treatment during this time. And of course, baby boomers are the lowest at 16%. Keeping in mind that they in particular may still be, with the representation of the first slide of seeing mental health for crazy people as bad as, if you have to get help, then it must be, we don't talk about that, we pray about it. Whatever upbringing that may have been there, they may still have that ideology, which I understand. But I'm at least glad that I'm seeing for the generations now and at least to come. And there's kind of an increasing trend of seeking services and help for themselves. And also wanted to notice the no, but thinking about it. This is just as valid as something to look into. I'm seeing, 20% down to even 10% for the baby boomers is quite impressive even for me to say. But just the fact that people are thinking about it, curious about it, wondering what it's like to maybe get help is significant as well. And of course, the no, I'm not thinking about it. A lot of people still have the negative stigmas and myths about what mental health is. I'm doing a training on why that might be next month. But it's valid in that reasoning as well. I come from the South where you pray everything away, so that might be a big bulk of it. Some people may not be aware of how severe their symptoms may be. They're just coping and do the best they can. A number of reasons why we may fall into this, but each is valid as well. But I just wanted a visual representation of what's going on now. And let me get in the chat. Okay, Wilderness Babe, I think the ability to pay would also impact the no, but thinking about it. Yes, thank you, Wilderness Babe. Affordability, availability, a lot of therapists are booked right now. Waiting lists are 6 months out. So that's a valid thing that will have us here. Therapy is expensive, especially when we get into the different kinds of therapies. The more specialized you want, the more it costs. Starting at $150 an hour. A lot of people may do the sliding scale. A lot of people may or may not accept insurance. So those are all a lot of factors that lead to the no. But hopefully coming here, you could at least learn some ways to kind of finesse the system or make it work for you. Pineapple being one of them, offering subsidized, affordable treatment for people in the adult industry. So there's a lot of opportunities like that. We just have to, know where it's at and ask the right questions to get there. So thank you for that insight, Wilderness Babe. Before I move on from this slide, are there any more reflections on this or input of why you think it's more yes, why you think it's more no? Yes, go ahead, Eugene.
Yeah, I think you kind of covered it well. I think it's just the change, between generation. I think with baby, there's still a lot of stigma about, and I know you mentioned that approaches such as praying. I think those, I think a more like pastoral type counseling approach can really have a lot of value as well. But I think that it's still, I think there's still a mentality, especially more so even in other parts of the world, I think, where it's still viewed upon with a lot of stigma if somebody goes to get therapy. I assume that chart was just for the US, it seemed like, Sam, but I know that I've worked with a couple of clients in India, and it was very interesting because there's still like a fair amount of stigma for going to see a therapist. So it was something that I first had to kind of work through with them and help them feel more comfortable. And then they did, after we just talked about it, I think they felt a lot better about it. But initially there's much more, I think, stigma in the culture in general.
Absolutely. Culture plays a tremendous part of, coming to see someone. A lot of communities, we keep it in the family, or we pray about it, or, we still aren't comfortable with what that means for somebody to go to therapy and seeing someone. Yeah. So thank you for the culture piece. Generationally as well, I now can't binge watch. I just binge watch You. They have a couples therapist. I was watching Sex and the City. They have a therapist. Yeah. So now it's like this cool, not a shameful thing. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to go see my therapist today. And I see clients ranging from 13 to 60. Okay. So just their reasons for coming in are just so different. One to just check in and make sure, I stay, stable, and others just wait till things get worse and then they come to see me. Yeah. So definitely generational, see some gaps there and everything. So now, before I get into the next slide, I'm really curious, because we're about to get into the fun stuff, but what therapies are you aware of at the moment? Is it just traditional CBT talk therapy? Have you heard of art therapy? What has you curious about coming here? What do you know about it already? Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Yes, Wilderness Babe, please. Yeah. I don't know what I just did though. Yes, go ahead. Oh, let me put you on. I'm sorry. Let me put you on. Okay. Okay, it should be good now.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Or at least it is for me. I realize some of you might be on the East Coast. Yeah. And so kind of to answer your question, I worked in a treatment facility, went to treatment both pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And so I'm very fortunate that I've gotten exposure to things like lifespan integration, EMDR, yes. A lot of trauma-based therapy, a lot of trauma-informed care, and then also things like dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. I myself have gone down and done plant medicine ceremonies in order to kind of work through what blockage I was kind of holding myself back from. I've worked with shamans when it comes to psilocybin experiences, and then as of recently, I tried a ketamine trial with a local hospital. And it's interesting to see kind of the comparison between where I am, which is very rural and remote, compared to maybe more of a metropolis area where you have more options when it comes to different therapists. And so I definitely have become very grateful from the pandemic opening up telehealth. I think that's made such a big difference for people's lives.
Yes, and the timing couldn't be more perfect, because maybe not even 2 years ago, you might have got a whole different experience where it's either you want this therapy or that, and that was it. But the timing you came, there's a plethora of things, which the next slide will go into more. And it's not just psychologically based, it's spiritually based. We're getting more into plant medicines now in ceremonies, the use of shamans to work alongside some therapists, or they coexist in one way or another. So I'm really glad to hear that your experience, because if it weren't and you were introduced to something else, that probably would have ruined therapy for you in the long run, and you probably wouldn't have been receptive to trying again or exploring again. And it's unfortunate that just, the timing, that was a lot of people's experience, and they're just shut off to the idea now. Whereas you came with a lot of offerings, a lot of alternatives, a lot of options. And I'm glad that you explored with them too, taking some from here, taking some from there, making it your own, because that's what true therapy is supposed to be. Any other insight or shares from that? Yes, Eugene.
Yeah, I think it's great that there's so much more that's offered now. I know, seems like not that long ago where was mainly just a model of just, talk therapy, which, can be helpful, but I think it can also be quite limiting. I personally do, nowadays, I mostly do EMDR with clients.
Yes.
Although I also incorporate things like, like cognitive behavioral therapy and I'd say like a mindfulness/awareness approach. I think that can be very, very helpful as well. But I know there's many out there that I don't, just have training, like I don't have training in DBT or in, and, there's like somatic experiencing, I think, and a whole bunch of others, which I've heard about, but, I don't have specific training in. And of course, one of the newer developments being the psychedelic treatments. So I think there's a lot of new options out there, which is really quite fascinating. I think the psychedelic one is interesting as well to see where we'll go, because I'm of the opinion that if it can help people and can be done safely, I don't think I don't have anything against. I don't see why somebody would be against it. But I think it's an important topic that's come up in recent years.
Yes, and I love how this is a good mix and room of both clients and clinicians, because we could have an honest conversation of what goes on. Like the moment that a client is researching therapists and looking for people, like Eugene is saying, being specialized in EMDR and things of that, it's not just something we put on the resume or put on our websites and it looks so cool. Like that is a dedication, it's commitment. It's saying, I'll never forget, one of my supervisors let me know, pick your specialization and stick to it. Because, clients, they're wanting more. And I'm so glad to see that there's therapists that are doing the extra work in order to provide those services. So, people like Wilderness Babe, they could go into those settings and have options. Because again, as we could see from the first slide, that wasn't always the case. Did you raise it again, Eugene, or you're fine?
Oh no, I'm sorry, I had left it raised. I put
it's okay.
and as well, I've been, I have been in a time, so I'm a client, as well. So I think it's good to have experience on both sides as well. Like I've certainly worked with a fair number of, I think, therapists and things and psychiatrists over the years. So yeah.
Yes, and we have some gratitude from Wilderness Babe. Thank you, Eugene, for practicing what you are trained in. I have multi-therapists who have practiced out of their scope. Not only is that a legal and ethical issue, it is.
Well, yeah, you should probably be trained in EMDR, not just,
Yeah, it's very scary. And I have a whole little preaching on that later. So I'm glad you're aware to know what to look for. If somebody trained and licensed are two separate things. So, I'll get into that too, especially when we get into the spirituality realm and EMDR, hypnosis, state realm. These are very serious, complex treatment approaches. So please, making sure that people have the correct credentials and licensing for that. Thank you. And I'm sorry it went horribly. So this next one, yeah, thanks for everyone for sharing their insight. This is just a very brief overview of the many treatment approaches that are now offered within therapeutic and clinical settings. You know, to go in deep detail with all of these would take maybe way more time than I have. So I'll do a brief screenshot of things if you want to expand and talk more further, or if you're trained in it and it could, you know, clarify a bit more, I offer that as well. But yes, evolved interventions. Again, we're moving kind of away, or at least adding on alongside the traditional model, and now seeing more psychological, expressive therapy, spiritual therapy, and of course, the most exciting right now, psychedelic therapy. So as we all mentioned before, we have traditional therapy that can involve cognitive behavioral therapy, which is in a very, very, very simple sense, thinking about the thoughts, reconstructing thoughts in more productive and self-serving ways. You know, really pausing on those narratives that no longer serve us and just exploring alternatives, or at least figuring out the source or where that's coming from. So CBT, a lot of thoughts. DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, to me is a lot of emotion. Regulating emotion, trying to figure out ways to stabilize what we may be feeling. This is where the birth of a lot of the mindfulness and grounding, which is buzzing right now, kind of birthed from, and just using our five senses to bring us to the present moment. Essentially not allowing our emotions to take over and lead to elevated behaviors and emotions, which then cause a vicious cycle of over and over again problematic behavior. So this is seen for a lot of personality and mood disorders, assisting and helping with interpersonal communication issues within ourselves and in our relationships. So you'll see a lot of that there. The humanistic model, this is my jam. I see myself as a humanistic therapist. I'm all about, I think, as I mentioned earlier, holistic approaches, not just the behavior, not just the cognitions, but the human being as a whole, their spirituality, you know, really taking time to develop their sense of self, not the sense of self that the therapist is bringing in the room, but what can they bring and what do they want to see in their lives? So I use a lot of guided discovery through that. The client is basically their own expert in treatment, which may be against a lot of other teachings from the past. So I see a lot of more therapists along myself moving more towards this. And then psychodynamic. This is your traditional talk therapy, as Eugene mentioned, which is still very helpful. I have clients who just vent pretty much for 50 minutes and that helps them. They don't have the support, or maybe they are not comfortable enough to feel seen or heard in their environments. So my therapy room is the only place where they could feel seen and heard. And that's enough. You know, it doesn't take all the fancy interventions and techniques, but just processing and allowing them a space to be themselves is transformative as well. Any questions about traditional? Okay. And more psychological based, this is kind of cutting edge right now. We have hypnosis assisted therapy, which is just as it sounds. The individual is put, I don't want to say put under, but maybe in a trance-like state under a hypnotic intervention that the therapist, who has to be trained in, by the way, will help process a lot of blocked emotions, a lot of things that are being repressed and not brought to the surface. This is a good way to do so if you're lacking that self-awareness piece, or just not able to, you know, bring forward a lot of stuff that's been, you know, causing you issues and barriers, both behaviorally, cognitively, whatever. And my favorite right now, EMDR. I myself am trained in it, not licensed. So I'm just going to provide a brief overview of it. It's a complex approach and intervention for victims of traumatic events. I mean, sexual trauma, or maybe some prior physical abuse, people who have been victims of, robberies, or just things that really involve the body being violated in one way or another, and then in turn having the cognitive piece develop too as a result. So a lot of victims of PTSD, a lot of flashbacks they see, the triggers from environments, our sensations, our words, our images. A lot of that gets stored in the body and stored in the psyche. So what EMDR does is kind of re-expose and relive the trauma in a safe container so that they're able to actually process what happened. I'm gonna show a brief video. Again, this is a complex, the video is like a 50-minute session, and what I'm gonna show is a 3-minute snippet of 30 minutes in. So you'll get to see the bilateral stimulants. So the clinician will be doing this back and forth thing with their arms. That's kind of getting them that hypnotic state, that altered state of consciousness where they're able to process things more. So I'm just going to quickly show that. It's a long process, but just to give an idea, because it's kind of hard to explain. And let me know if y'all can hear and see this.
I didn't want to breathe. Okay. Anything else you're noticing right now? Like my lungs can't take air in. Okay. Go with that. Really shallow. Go with that. Mm-hmm. Keep noticing. Go with that, whatever you're at.
Okay, and for that, I forgot to give a background. So that is a client who had a very traumatic drowning experience, and it's to the point where they can't be near water, can't fly over bodies of water. There's a bridge to get to work. She cannot cross that bridge because it's over a body of water, can't go swimming with the family. So they were just trying to process that trauma. And as you could see, it's not a lot of talking. It's a lot of go with that, keep noticing. If you notice the client's body, the chest started to rise, heartbeat probably started elevating because they're reliving the trauma, but taking breaths as you saw the clinician inviting them to do so that they can get through it. A lot of trauma survivors, they replay and kind of reach a stop or a block at certain points in a way that they never could heal. So EMDR is and again, complex. It's 8 phases. If you could see, you could watch the YouTube video if you want in your own time. 50-minute session, and it's basically that the whole time. reliving, reprocessing, and replacing the traumatic feelings and sensations and thoughts with just some deep breaths and some relaxation. So really complex. And I really shout out Eugene for taking that on as the training and providing it to clients, because I can imagine to both, you know, provide it and receive it in a container with that can be a lot.
Yeah, no, it's a great, it's probably one of the most, like, you know, kind of amazing therapies I've been able to, I guess, fortunate to learn so far, because it is so much faster and so much more, I feel, effective than many of the older ones out there. So, you know, I think so far most of the clients I work with have either had like a, you know, like at least a helpful experience, or like a really, like, just, you know, really helpful experience. But they're all, you know, gradually, I think, making progress. So it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And just keeping in mind the techniques too. There was the bilaterals, everything.
Yeah.
There's that. There's the tapping one. There's like literally devices where
Yeah, there's the tappers. I use with most people, I think actually all people currently, I use the, like, a little software program that has a ball go across the screen on their laptop, and they just follow it. Now then I don't have to do the whole thing with my fingers all the time. So, because, you know, I do a lot of sets of that, but yeah.
Yeah, so that is a really, you know, for people who've experienced trauma or severe misfortune, I would say if traditional talk therapy and our psychiatry and medication isn't efficient, that would probably be the next step that I would recommend. Oh. Okay, let me start sharing again. Okay. So yeah, getting more into expressive forms of therapy, which people underestimate. There are such thing as licensed art therapists, licensed dance therapists. It's just exactly what it sounds. Art, some people, they aren't verbally expressive, or they can't process things, you know, even through some interventions such as cognitive behavior or DBT, you know, but colors and the stroke of a brush and symbolism through imagery is more their speed. So that is definitely something worth exploring. Dance therapy, there are licensed dance therapists. A lot of trauma and stress gets trapped in the body. I, for one, store it a lot in the neck and the hips. So dancing, you know, Afro beats, just very moving it out of the body energetically and physically can be healing as well. Play therapy is my favorite. I've worked with kids 3 to 5 years old and did play therapy where we literally play and use dolls and, you know, role playing through playing house and using that as insight into how they view the world and shape their reality. I also do play therapy within sex therapy, where BDSM, kink spaces, fetishes are utilized to normalize and heal trauma and just help couples, poly groups, and whatever reclaim their sexuality, their expression to explore in this realm. So that could be very beneficial as well. And also narrative therapy. If you're a journaler or like very big on writing, it could be very powerful, especially where we live in a world where narratives shape us. We have narratives about ourselves, about the way we view things, about, you know, things that we tell ourselves, whether positive or negative, and just taking the time to reconstruct that and literally rewrite your story can be helpful too. Before I move into the spiritual and psychedelic realm, I do want to say that this may be like all of this over here. You could find licensed therapists who either are licensed in these interventions or who offer that as a specialization. When we get more into spirituality and psychedelic, again, history is literally taking place now. So there's still a lot of catch up from the mental health side to get into the spiritual. But you can find some therapists who specialize in some spirituality techniques or even now psychedelic techniques. But until that's more universal, I would say to maybe explore having your licensed therapist paired with a spiritual coach, a spiritual guide, a shaman, a spiritual community, just until things get a little more clear, because there's a lot of, again, people saying they're one thing and saying they provide this service, but especially when we get into the spiritual and psychedelic realm, you don't want to play with that. So there is prayer therapy, counseling, Christian counseling services, or whatever religion is your preference. I rather maybe have a therapist who knows the deep depths of my trauma, maybe pray over my things, and maybe my preacher who knows surface level things. This is, interesting because we're so used to separating church and state, and, you either pray or you go to therapy. We usually don't mix both, especially in my household. But how powerful could it be to integrate the two? So if you're more into that, know that that's an option for you. Shadow work is something I offer as a spiritually based intervention within my own therapy. It does a lot of incorporating the shadow self, or the dark self or hidden self, that self that might show up at Starbucks when you're yelling at the people because they didn't get your order right, or where you're like, okay, where did that come from? That's the shadow. And a lot of time we repress that essence of self, or we try to push it away, making it stronger and making it manifest in different ways and different behaviors. So just bringing that shadow more into the light, just speaking more into it, ego talk, if you're into that, is something that you could explore as well, or at least try to see if the therapist can incorporate into treatment. You don't have to be licensed for this, but the way they're capitalizing trainings and seminars on things, maybe soon you will be, but just know as of right now, it's not something you have to be licensed in. And then there's ancestral work. Again, I'm seeing therapists now say that they offer this, but I personally would rather have an elder or someone in the spiritual community that's been doing this for years offer these spaces, because now we're tapping into spiritual realms and things, beyond the physical. So you want to be careful with that. But ancestral work is just using ancestor spirit guides, things beyond this realm that can assist you in healing. I'm Southern Baptist, so I have a lot of generational curses, generational beliefs and conditioning that took a lot to break, more than talk therapy, more than, spiritual journeys. It took me calling in a different person in a different realm and medium. So, pairing that with therapy could help if you're still experiencing some blocks in that arena. Whew, so I need a breather, but is there any questions before I get into psychedelics? Because that's going to be a whole nother long speech.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I know I didn't raise the hand. I just figured because I'd forget to lower probably later, but I was going to say that, no, I think it's great that you really covering all of these different approaches. And I think it's good. I don't know, I guess it is an interesting thing. I think whether a therapist can also be, trained in something. That's kind of what I've been trying to maybe pursue as well, is being, maybe getting trained over time in some of these newer areas. And I don't know, I feel like the more tools you sort of can have in your toolbox that you're properly trained in, I think the better, whether you call the person a therapist or a, like a spiritual counselor or something. I think at the end of the day, I think they all, they rely on different techniques. I think it's probably, it's okay as long as you have the proper training to, I think the more maybe tools you can have, the better to be able to help someone, because or I guess you could visit one person with a therapist and one who's like a, spiritual coach. So I guess, both can work. I mean, that's just my view, but I think you have to have, there's a lot of training if you want to do both and kind of integrate it. I think integration can be a wonderful thing as well,
Yeah. And again, going back to making the treatment your own, I see someone for sex therapy and then referred them to also see a tantra healer to really move through that and another expression. And they go to see someone at the dungeon and process through, some role playing. Yeah. So, you could have your team, you could afford it and have the availability for sure. But if not, there are therapists out there who are actually making it their mission to get trained and trained the right way, not just a week seminar in Malibu, but actually going to the Amazon, hanging out with the shamans and learning the culture, seeing how the plants are not birthed and used and not just packaging it. So Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, make it your own and make sure that if you are going to have a team or have someone who's integrating a little bit of this and that, that they're trained. Again, I
Yeah.
can't express that enough.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and now into the fun psychedelics. Let me share. Like I said before, history is being made. We've spent generations on the pharmaceutical psychiatric model of treatment, and I'm not anti-medications. I'm just against this idea that it's a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid. And again, if medications work for you, I'm really happy to hear it, but I get concerned when is the true root of the problem being addressed, especially when we think of pharmaceutical companies that are literally making gazillions of dollars of keeping people, symptomatic. So now we're seeing a shift literally in history right now from psychiatry to psychedelics to plant medicines to things that are claiming that studies are showing can heal in one dose or one session, then compared to 10 years of medication management. So that's my little spiel about it and how I open it up. Again, I'm not pro this or pro that, but I am big on research and it's all out there if you're looking to see it. And as far, again, I'm in the US, I'm not sure what's going on globally, but as of the United States, ketamine is the only psychedelic assisted therapy that is legal and approved. Clinics are popping up all over California. I know Field Trip and Mind Bloom are one of the big ones. Even private practices are working alongside individuals that can give ketamine doses and providing therapy in that scope. I am not trained in ketamine, but I hear that is similar to the journey of psilocybin, MDMA, and ayahuasca, all of which kind of allows us to be our own inner healers. It takes us to a place where we're able to process things more efficiently. We're more receptive to realizing things and becoming self-aware of things. And I know that ketamine, again, they're saying that one dosage session is equivalent to like years of therapy. So for that, it's a really exciting time for me. But again, also being careful in the way they're capitalizing and making this into now a big money thing and sticking to the people that are truly just wanting to heal the community versus making profit out of it. But that's ketamine. Psilocybin, I mentioned earlier, I'm part of the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. So I am a psychedelic assisted therapy, but until it's approved, I'm kind of that's just an icebreaker, cool thing to say until I could actually do something with it. The good news is that MAPS is on their third clinical trial with the FDA, and they're on their way to being approved for psychedelic assisted treatment for 2023. So that's just what I'm hearing. So, if you're excited about that and want to keep up with it, I know MAPS, MAPS, is big at the research and the newsletters, and on Instagram, they give daily updates of where they are in the process. So again, a really exciting time. Let me see who's chatting there. Oh, okay, that's a YouTube thing.
Yes, that was me. It was a YouTube. It's actually really interesting, and it's about kind of the psychedelic world that's opening up. And it talks about MAPS, but it actually talks a lot about this one company called Compass, who has actually been patenting psilocybin in order to then go and distribute it.
Oh, yes. And I think their mistake, correct me if I'm wrong, is working with Johns Hopkins.
They actually are working they're based in both the US and in the UK. And so they're getting patents in both, but there are groups like in Oregon who just worked really hard to pass, oh my goodness, I can't think of it right off the top of my head. It got passed back in 2020 when they legalized psilocybin administration. And I want to say it was like yes on 191. And unfortunately, when we have these larger companies who are creating these patents, that's impacting these smaller grassroots agencies and organizations who are trying to give it to someone who's not going to be able to afford the pharmaceutical realm of what this world could become. And so it's a very interesting, they go into very many different realms of the MDMA psilocybin world, but I just thought this would be a good group to kind of drop that to.
Yes, thank you for that resource. Because again, there's so much happening, and you know, we're kind of distracted by just the state of the world in general, but patents are being made, laws are being passed. We could vote on these things. There's like, I forget the code. I'm not good at the law and politics and business side of things, which I'm glad you could provide more insight, but it's definitely something to be aware of, because if we're just gonna do this thing and it's gonna takes thousands of dollars to get treatment, then what's the point? Like, we might as well keep it in the community and do it on, there's underground healers who do offer this service, you know, on the low key, just to avoid this, you know, capitalist movement that's always just a part of it, unfortunately. So good news is that it's happening. Bad news is it may be not as affordable, but hopefully there'll be therapists, you know, like me, that are open to, you know, still providing it in the community on the side without all that other hoopla. But yeah, please do the research and know who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, if it's such a thing, because it is a very historical moment. But again, in order for such momentum to happen, of course, you know, some bad eggs are going to get a hold of the revolution as well. Okay, and then I'll quickly just do what was left. Okay. Oh yeah, okay, so that's psilocybin. So shrooms and microdosing is also already kind of normalized and has been seen to defeat postpartum. Yeah, so a lot of research out there. If you want some articles, just let me know, and I have a plethora of that to provide. And really quickly, because we're running out of time, ayahuasca originated in the Amazons, and it truly is something that is, I believe, a jungle plant medicine. It's literally a vine and a tree, I believe, is mixed, and it's very deep and sacred. They talk of masculine and feminine energy that's involved in it. In some cultures, indigenous groups, it's a religion, like that. That's how serious they take it, and they get closer to God and get visions from God. But unfortunately now it's more, you know, buzzing, and a lot of people are now taking trips out there to go through journeys and ceremonies, which I appreciate. If you're going to do it, you know, do it in the setting that it was originated. But now, which is still maybe not the worst thing, it's now coming, I've seen it a lot in California. Yeah, ayahuasca is very powerful from what I have seen. Yeah, it's very powerful stuff. It takes you to an altered state of consciousness, another realm, another being. You know, I can't, from seeing God to seeing ourselves in the future, from seeing us as a divine being connected to all and everyone, it takes you there. So yeah, now I'm seeing a lot, especially in LA, a lot of ceremonies are now happening in state as well. Again, just be very careful. As Todd mentioned, it's powerful stuff. You want to have the right, yeah, Mama Aya has been the most helpful part of my mental health journey. Yeah, powerful stuff. So you want to have the right healers, you want to have the right setting and intention. As we know, in psychedelics is everything. You want to ensure that you know where you want to go. I personally don't believe in bad trips, but there is such a thing. You know, all I feel is part of the healing process, and promoting the inner healer is what a lot of these plant medicines do. But again, being productive with it. There are some therapists who offer, you know, integration. Again, I know what MAPS does, whether it's ayahuasca, psilocybin, whatever the MDMA, whatever the psychedelic, they literally sit with the client for 8 hours during their trip, and they don't even process or integrate until the morning after. And I know people that have dabbled in this realm know what it's like to have this trip and see things and go places, and then the next morning be like, what? It's overwhelming to process on your own. So to have a licensed professional do it alongside you can be very healing. Yeah, they need to think about whether they have high blood pressure, so make sure that people know what they're doing. I know with MAPS, every 10 minutes they're checking vitals, they're hydrating. So their whole thing is we're providing a safe environment to do this while also integrating everything that's being discovered. So I know in the Netherlands, a lot of UK, a lot of Berlin, they're having all the fun right now. They literally have retreats in Amazon as well, but it's more the clinical setting in like the Netherlands and everything. Like ayahuasca retreats, psilocybin retreats. So although it's not legal here, if you want to go, you know, when COVID maybe calms down, that's an option for you. Again, ayahuasca is now becoming more in the United States, Oregon for sure, California for sure, Vegas. Slowly but surely, it's becoming more acceptable and legalized everywhere. So keep that in mind if you're wanting to explore. This last slide really quickly. Kind of like, now what? You know, I already preached about, oh, can y'all see the screen? Let me share it again.
No, don't see it.
Okay, thank you. Here it is. I already preached about, you know, consultations. If you're going to explore this with a clinician, therapist, practitioner, spiritual healer, spiritual guide, whatever, do your research, have a consultation with them, see what they're trained and licensed in, see where they did their training. If it was just like a little cookie cutter thing in the States, or they did the voyage, the intensive months of training, you know, within the cultures that they're using these interventions. Psychology today is a basic, you know, finding a therapist, finding EMDR trained therapists, kind of more of the traditional and psychological piece of things. Mind Bloom and Field Trips are the more leading ketamine clinics right now in the US. I know that Mind Bloom is now offering at-home kits that could come with its own risk and pros and cons and everything. So just be sure to be careful with that. Psychedelic Support is for all things non-traditional therapy. So cannabis assisted therapy, depending on the state, ketamine assisted therapy. This is where you'll find where we're moving towards more, you know, spirituality based and consciousness based therapy practitioners in your area. Well set is ancestral workers, energy healers, Reiki healers. If you're looking for more so for that, well set is a good place for that. Therapy for Black girls is a panel I'm on. Just wanted to let people know there is a space for Black people, queer Black people of color as well. You know, that wasn't the case maybe at least a year ago, but things are changing and I want people to know that. And of course, Pineapple Support, shout out to them for all the great work they do and the services that they provide for the adult industry community and beyond. Woo! And yeah, sorry I had to breeze through that. Were there any closing remarks, questions, concerns? I know that was a lot that we covered, but I hope at least introducing you to this world of possibilities, you understand that you are in control of your treatment and it can look like whatever you want it to look like. You have the power with that.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I really loved it. I was going to ask, what training do you recommend if, you know, with, you know, so I work as a therapist. So any, like in terms of psychedelics, whether for integration, or do you know what kind of reputable organizations provide training? I think you had mentioned MAPS. Yes,
MAPS has a really good training right now. So does Compass, like, was it Eve who mentioned, no, Wilderness Babe who mentioned that. So MAPS and Compass are the leading ones in that regard. If you're looking for more like, now even schools are offering certifications in this. California Institute of Integral Studies.
Oh, sure, yeah, I've heard of it. Yep.
Really good, competitive though. Psychedelic program if you want to get certified in that, and that has legitimacy in the psychedelic world. So those are good places to start. If you're looking for more indigenous going to the land, WOOF, WOOF They have places all over the globe, Argentina, Tulum, you name it, Puerto Rico. They offer like their own culturally based certificate if you're looking for more so where it's coming.
These trainings, are they more for like actual administration, sitting with the person, processing through the whole, or do they offer ones for like integration, maybe people who come in afterwards and want to see a therapist who can like help them integrate? Like, are those two different types of trainings, or how does it work?
Oh, I know for a fact that MAPS is both. Like they like sitting 8 hours with the client, and blood pressure, doing the music, setting the tone, and then the day after the integration. I'm not sure with Compass, but from my understanding, we're all kind of copying each other, seeing what's working. So they're all pretty similar.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time here. And I love that you mentioned that you're a psychedelic assisted therapist, and kind of just waiting for that legalization, because that's actually my end goal. Is I'm currently in school so that I can then go to one of the places that you mentioned in order to get that certification. And so it's great to see someone like in person, real, it's happening. And so thank you for representing it, for vocalizing it, and again for just sharing all of this information with more people.
Absolutely, my pleasure. This is the right time. 2023 is the rumor that I'm hearing that it's going to boom. So you already want to have, certifications, everything ready to go, so that you're not in this long line of people that are, waiting. You want to start right now. So I'm so glad that you're here and that you hopefully took what you could. Yes, my pleasure, Pineapple Support. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm doing trainings, I think February, March. So if you guys see me and want to check out some more, you're welcome to attend. But if not, it's been a pleasure connecting with each and one of you. Take care.